The sun over Carthane 4 was red. Not metaphorically red. Not poetically red. Red like spilled blood across a dying sky. The planet had once been a thriving agricultural colony on the outer rim, golden wheat stretching across valleys, irrigation drones humming softly in the dawn light, children racing wind harvesters between the rows. Now it was a forgotten world, abandoned by the core, ignored by the trade coalition, written off as non-strategic. The only thing that made Carthane valuable was its soil, rich, dark, almost unnaturally fertile. That soil was the reason Mara Vey stayed. She was not from Carthane. She had arrived 2 cycles ago on a damaged freighter, fleeing debt collectors from the inner systems. She intended to repair her ship, harvest a season's worth of grain, and leave. But then she met him. Elias Thorne. He was already there when she arrived, standing knee-deep in soil, sleeves rolled up, broad shoulders bent to the work. No drones. No automation. Just hands in the dirt. She thought he was strange the first time she saw him. Most settlers relied on tech. He relied on muscle. He didn't talk much either. When she introduced herself, he simply nodded and said, "Water runs shallow on the East Ridge. Don't plant there." That was it. No questions about where she came from. No curiosity. No warmth. And yet, he helped her repair her freighter's stabilizers without being asked. He left spare nutrient packs outside her quarters. When storms rolled in, he reinforced her greenhouse panels overnight without telling her. He moved in silence, worked in silence, lived in silence. The locals called him the quiet plow. Mara called him stubborn. He rose before dawn every day. He tilled by hand. He sharpened tools himself instead of using nanoforges. He refused upgrades to his home grid. No implants. No neural interface. No AI assistant. Just soil. Just work. One evening, as they sat watching the twin moons rise over the wheat fields, she asked him, "Why do you still farm like this?" He didn't look at her. "Because the soil deserves hands," he said. She laughed. "That's poetic. It's practical." She thought that was the strangest thing he'd ever said. She had no idea how wrong she was about him. Middle, the day the sky opened. The invasion came without warning. It began as a tremor in the air. The birds vanished first. Then the sky cracked. 3 massive dreadships tore through orbit like black knives, eclipsing the sun. Their hulls shimmered with gravitic distortion, their insignia burning white against obsidian armor. The Vorex Dominion. Mara knew the name. Everyone did. They were not conquerors. They were erasers. A message echoed across planetary channels. Resource world designated for extraction. Population relocation unnecessary. That meant extermination. Panic spread through the colony. People ran for shelters. Transports attempted emergency launch. They were vaporized mid-ascent. Shock troopers fell from the sky and dropped pods that slammed into the fields, crushing wheat beneath armored boots. Mara ran. She didn't know where she was running, only that survival demanded movement. Energy fire tore through barns. Explosions ripped irrigation lines apart. Screams carried across the wind like broken glass. She reached Elias's farmhouse just as the first wave of troopers advanced over the ridge. "Elias," she shouted. "We have to go." He stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth.
"Calm. Too calm."
"They've marked us for harvest," she said breathlessly. "We can't fight them. We have to hide." He looked at the burning fields, at the dead sky, at the soldiers marching forward. And something changed. Not in his posture, not in his expression, but in the air around him. "How many ships?" he asked quietly. 3 Dread class. Dozens of carriers. He nodded once. That's more than last time. Mara froze. Last time? The first Vorax squad crested the hill. 8 of them.
Tall.
Multi-limbed. Encased in reactive alloy armor. Weapons humming with plasma charge. They opened fire without warning. Elias moved. Mara would later struggle to remember the details. Only fragments remained. The way his body blurred. The way he closed 30 meters before the second shot fired. The way his hand tore through alloy plating like it was wet paper. The way the ground cracked when he struck. The first troopers had separated from its torso. The second's weapon exploded in its hands. The third tried to retreat. It did not get far. In less than 12 seconds, 8 Vorax shock troopers lay broken across the soil. Silence returned. Mara stared at him. He stood among alien corpses, breathing evenly. No blood on him. No visible wounds. You, she whispered. What are you? He looked at his hands. They weren't supposed to find this world. That's not an answer. He turned toward the sky. They never stop hunting. More drop pods screamed downward. Dozens this time. They'll level the colony, she said. Yes. Then we need to run.
No. His voice was different now.
Not louder. Not angrier. Just final. They came to harvest, he said. They chose the wrong field. Revelation. The weapon beneath the soil. They fell back to the barn. Mara followed him inside, heart hammering. He moved to the far wall and pressed his palm against old wood paneling. The barn shimmered. The illusion dropped. Metal replaced timber. Weapon racks replaced farming tools. A vertical containment pod pulsed with dormant power. Mara staggered back. You've been living in a bunker.
No, he said.
In a sheath. The pod opened with a hiss. Inside was armor. Not polished. Not ceremonial.
Scarred.
Repaired. Rebuilt. War armor. It folded over his body like liquid steel, locking into place with mechanical precision. Lines of light traced across its surface. Systems hummed to life. His eyes changed. Glowed faint gold. Elias, her voice shook. Tell me. He faced her. My designation was Aegis 9. I was built in the final years of the Human-Vorax War. She had heard whispers of that war. A conflict erased from most public archives. Humanity had nearly been wiped out at the frontier. They engineered us, he continued. Adaptive soldiers. Biomechanical integration. Self-repairing tissue. Gravitic musculature. We were made to break them. Made. Yes. The barn shook as bombardment struck nearby. I was deployed on 12 extinction fronts. We pushed them back. Destroyed their hive fleets. Forced them beyond the rim. Then why are you here? Because we won. She blinked. That doesn't sound like defeat.
It was.
He stepped closer. When the war ended, the Corps decided weapons like me were no longer necessary. Too dangerous. Too independent. They tried to dismantle you. They tried to erase us. A faint, humorless smile touched his face. They underestimated how hard we are to kill. Outside, Vorax artillery began flattening the colony. I chose exile, he said. A quiet world. A simple life. And farming. He looked toward the soil beyond the barn walls. I needed to remember how to create instead of destroy. Another explosion. Closer. Mara swallowed. They're not leaving.
No.
What are you going to do? His helmet sealed over his face. Harvest. Climax. The war returns. He stepped outside as orbital fire scorched the horizon. Missiles streaked downward. He raised one hand. The air bent. The missiles veered off course, slamming into a Vorax landing platform instead. Shockwaves rippled across the fields. Troopers advanced in waves. He met them head-on. He moved like a force of nature. Plasma bolts curved away from him. Blades shattered against his armor. Every strike he delivered carried the force of collapsing stone. He tore through ranks with terrifying efficiency. But the Vorax adapted. Heavy walkers deployed. Siege beasts lumbered forward. A carrier descended, disgorging elite units. Mara watched from the barn doorway, unable to move. He was one being against an army, and he was winning. Until the dreadship in orbit charged its primary weapon. The sky turned white. A planet cracker beam began forming above the colony. Mara screamed his name. He looked up. Even he could not outrun orbital annihilation. For the first time since the attack began, she saw hesitation. Not fear. Calculation. Then, he opened a channel. A signal older than the colony. Older than Carthane. Sleeping sentinels, he transmitted. Mara didn't understand. Until the ground trembled. Across the planet, beneath forgotten farms and abandoned mining shafts, hidden bunkers activated. Other barns shimmered. Other silos dissolved into armored vaults. They rose from the soil like giants waking from burial. Aegis units.
Dozens of them.
All silent. All watching. The Vorax beam fired. And 43 Aegis soldiers leapt. They combined their fields. The beam struck. The planet shook. But the shield held. For 6 seconds. Long enough. Elias launched himself upward, propulsion tearing the air apart. He breached the upper atmosphere in moments. The dreadship rotated to track him. Too slow. He tore into its hull. What followed was not a battle. It was a reckoning. He ripped through corridors. Crushed command nodes. Shattered reactor cores. The dreadship exploded in orbit. Its burning carcass lit the sky like a second sun. On the surface, the remaining Vorax forces faltered. Aegis units advanced in perfect synchronization. Within 20 minutes, the invasion ended. Ending. The man who chose the soil. Smoke drifted across ruined fields. The colony was damaged, but alive. The surviving Aegis units gathered near the farmhouse. They stood like statues, waiting. Elias landed softly in the broken wheat. His armor cracked and fell away piece by piece. He looked older somehow, tired. The other Aegis watched him. One spoke. Directive? He looked at the colony, at Mara, at the soil beneath his feet. No more wars, he said. They will return. Yes. Then we prepare. He nodded slowly, but not like before. The Aegis waited. We defend, he said. We do not conquer. A pause. Then, one by one, the others deactivated combat protocols.
Not shut down.
Not sleep. Watchfulness. Mara approached him carefully. So, she said softly, you don't just till soil. A faint smile. I do. You were forged for war. Yes. But you chose this. He looked at the broken wheat. Kneeling, he picked up a handful of dark earth.
War is easy, he said.
Creation is harder. She knelt beside him. Will they come back? Yes. And next time? He met her gaze. Next time, they'll know this world is defended. The red sun began to set again. The surviving colonists emerged from hiding. Children stepped into the fields. Drones rebooted. Life resumed. The Aegis dispersed quietly across the planet, returning to hidden places beneath farms and mountains. Guardians beneath the soil. Elias stood slowly. Tomorrow, he said, we replant. Mara looked at the scorched earth. You think anything will grow? He pressed the soil back into place. It always does. Above them, Debris from the destroyed dreadship burned across the sky like falling stars. A reminder, a warning, and a promise. She had thought he tilled soil. She had thought he was a quiet farmer hiding from the galaxy. She had been wrong. He was a weapon that chose restraint. A soldier who chose peace. A man forged for war, who decided the most important battle was protecting something gentle enough
To grow.
And somewhere beyond the rim, in the dark between stars, the Vorax Dominion recalculated. Because Carthane 4 was no longer unguarded. It was planted, and humanity's deadliest harvest was waiting beneath the fields. The fires burned for 3 days. Not wildfires, those the Aegis extinguished within hours, but controlled burns. Cleansing flames to clear corrupted soil where Vorax bioweapons had seeped into the fields. The colony worked in silence, side by side with beings they had once believed were myths. Mara watched Elias from the porch of the rebuilt farmhouse. He wore no armor now. Just worn work gloves. Just dust on his boots. If someone had arrived that morning from another world, they would have seen nothing but a tall farmer repairing irrigation lines with careful hands. They would not have seen the dreadship he tore from orbit. They would not have heard the screams in vacuum. They would not have understood that the quiet man tightening a valve had once carried extinction in his veins. Children ran past him, laughing. He paused to steady one who tripped in the dirt. His reflexes were still impossibly fast, but gentle. Always gentle. That was the part that struck Mara the most. Not his strength. Not his power. His restraint. The gathering. On the 7th day after the invasion, the surviving colonists gathered in the central field. 43 Aegis stood at the perimeter, motionless. They did not loom. They did not intimidate. They simply watched. Elias stood before the settlers. No armor. No weapon.
Just a man.
We cannot promise the Dominion will not return, he said. His voice carried, without amplification.
Calm.
Even. They calculate in centuries. They hold grudges in millennia. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A mother stepped forward. Then how do we live like this? Waiting. Elias considered the question carefully. We don't wait. He knelt, pressing his palm into the dark soil. We plant. Confusion flickered across faces. They came because this world produces life, he continued.
Food.
Oxygen. Sustainability. They see value only in extraction. He looked up. We see value in growth. The wind shifted across the field. We fortify our orbit, he said. We rebuild the shield network. We train volunteers in planetary defense. We prepare.
He paused.
But we do not become them. Silence. One of the Aegis stepped forward. Its voice was deeper than Elias's, metallic beneath the human tone. Clarify directive. Elias did not turn. We defend this world, he said. And any others who call for help. A subtle shift rippled through the Aegis ranks. For the first time since their reactivation, their posture changed, not toward aggression. Toward purpose. The conversation at dusk. That evening, Mara found Elias sitting at the edge of the western ridge, where the wheat had burned hottest. The soil there was black and cracked. You could have left, she said quietly, sitting beside him. Yes. After the war. After they tried to erase you. Yes. You could have gone somewhere hidden. Somewhere safer. He studied the horizon. There is no safer, he said. Only quieter. She folded her arms. You're not angry? At who? The core. The Dominion. The universe. A long silence followed. I was built from anger, he said finally. Engineered from humanity's fear of extinction. Every enhancement in my body was forged in desperation. He turned his hands over, studying faint lines of circuitry beneath the skin. If I live angry, then they are still using me. Mara let that settle. So this. She gestured toward the fields. This is rebellion? A faint smile. Yes. She leaned back on her elbows, watching the twin moons rise. They looked terrified when the others came online, she said. They were. You scared them. I reminded them. Of what? That humanity does not forget. He glanced at her. But we also do not surrender what makes us human. The signal beyond the rim. Weeks later, long-range sensors detected movement at the edge of the system. A panic threatened to surge again. But this time, there was no chaos. The orbital platforms, quietly rebuilt by colonists and guided by Aegis precision, shifted into defensive alignment. Hidden satellites activated. The sky did not crack. It held. The approaching vessel was not Vorex. It was human. A battered reconnaissance frigate bearing core insignia. It transmitted a cautious hail. Unidentified defensive network. This is the CSV Meridian. We are responding to anomalous energy signatures recorded during a Vorex fleet loss. Identify yourselves. Mara stood beside Elias in the communications room, once a grain storage cellar. He activated the channel. This is Carthane 4, he said calmly. Colony status alive. A long pause crackled over comms. Alive, the captain repeated. Scans show Dread-class debris in orbit.
Correct.
Request clarification. Elias glanced at Mara, then back to the console. The Dominion attempted harvest. And they were repelled. Silence. Then, by whom? Elias considered his answer. Farmers. Mara nearly laughed. The captain's voice lowered. Our records show no registered military presence on Carthane 4.
There isn't, Elias said.
Another pause. Then, cautiously, the Corps believed all Aegis units were decommissioned. The air in the room stilled. Mara watched Elias carefully. We were, he said evenly. Then who? Elias cut the channel. Mara stared at him. That was rude. Yes. They're going to investigate. Yes. You don't sound worried. I'm not.
Why?
He stepped toward the viewport, overlooking the fields. Because now they know. Know what? He looked at her, not as a weapon, not as a soldier, as a man. That the frontier is not defenseless.
Seeds.
Replanting began at dawn the next day. The soil, enriched by ash and mineral residue from orbital debris, tested more fertile than before. Mara walked the rows beside Elias. You planned that, she accused lightly. The debris composition was predictable. You used a destroyed dreadship to fertilize a farm. Yes. She shook her head. You're terrifying. He pressed a seed into the earth. No, he said. I'm gardening. The first green shoots broke through within days. Faster than expected. Stronger. Life pushing upward through scarred ground. Children named one field Sentinel's Rest. Another they called Aegis Hollow. The name stuck. The other Aegis did not remain hidden anymore. They integrated. One oversaw irrigation redesign. Another reinforced orbital defense grids. Several began teaching combat survival classes, not to create soldiers, but to create confidence. They laughed sometimes. It startled everyone the first time. The final choice. Months later, a transmission arrived from the Corps. An offer. Full reinstatement. Pardons. Resources. Command authority reinstated under military oversight. Mara read it twice. Well, she asked. Elias stood in the doorway of the barn that was no longer hiding anything. The armor still rested within.
Cleaned.
Ready. He looked at it for a long time. Then he shut the containment pod. No, he said. That's it. Yes. You're turning down fleets, armies, authority. Yes. Why? He stepped back into the sunlight. Because the moment we become their weapon again, this world becomes a target. He walked past her toward the fields. And because I am tired of being forged. She followed him. So, what are you now? He stopped at the edge of the wheat, golden under twin suns. He considered the question like it mattered. I am a man, he said finally. And he looked over the vast expanse of growing life. I am needed here, the last line of defense. Far beyond the rim, in the cold dark where the Vorax Dominion rebuilt its shattered pride, a new designation entered their archives. Carthane 4. Status: fortified. Threat level: extreme. Aegis presence: confirmed. Recommended action: avoidance. For the first time in recorded Dominion history, a human agricultural colony was listed as a strategic hazard. Not because it conquered, not because it expanded, but because it endured. Final scene. Years later, when the field stretched farther than ever before and trade ships arrived not out of pity but partnership, a young girl asked Mara a question. Is it true, she whispered, that he destroyed a starship with his hands? Mara looked across the fields where Elias walked between rows of wheat, adjusting a water valve. He looked ordinary. He always did. Yes, Mara said softly. The girl's eyes widened. Then why does he farm? Mara smiled. Because he can. The wind rolled across Carthane, for like a living tide. The soil was dark. The wheat was tall. The sky was red. And beneath that peaceful world rested something the galaxy would never fully understand. A warrior who chose restraint. A weapon who chose mercy. A man who had been forged for war, but decided that the greatest act of strength was protecting something fragile enough
To grow.
And so he tilled the soil, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And that choice, more than any battle, changed the galaxy forever.